Father wiped out my entire life savings overnight because I refused to pay for my sister's $9 million mistake. I did not scream. I did not fight back. I just waited. 12 hours later, a loud knock echoed through his pristine Buckhead mansion. Police, open up. Before I tell you how I sent my entire family to prison without lifting a finger, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the bank account for a family that does not respect you. My name is Tiana, and at 34 years old, I have built a reputation as one of the sharpest forensic accountants in Atlanta. I track down hidden assets for the FBI and expose corporate fraud for Fortune 500 companies. I deal with liars and thieves every single day, but nothing could have prepared me for the criminals living in my own childhood home. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when I pulled my Mercedes into the circular driveway of my parents' estate in Buckhead. The house was a sprawling brick mansion with white columns that screamed old money and Southern prestige. It was the kind of house my father Marcus bought to prove to the world that a black man could conquer the South. But as I walked through the double mahogany doors, the air inside did not smell like success. It smelled like expensive lilies and sheer desperation. I found them in the formal living room. My mother Viola was weeping into a silk handkerchief on the velvet sofa. My younger sister Ebony was pacing back and forth, her 6-inch heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floor. And there, in the center of the room, sat Brad, my brother-in-law. Brad was the golden ticket in my father's eyes. He was white charming and claimed to be a tech visionary. My father loved parading him around the country club as proof that our family had transcended race. But right now, the golden boy looked like he was about to vomit. His face was pale, and he was sweating through his linen shirt. "Tiana, thank God you are here," my mother sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand. "We are in trouble, terrible trouble." I set my briefcase down and kept my face neutral. I had been summoned here for a family emergency, but looking around at the crystal vases and original artwork, it clearly was not a medical one. "What happened?" I asked, my voice calm. "Who is sick?" "Nobody is sick yet," Brad stammered, his voice shaking. "But if we do not come up with the money, they are going to kill me. Tiana, you have to help us." I crossed my arms. "Who is they? And how much is the money?" Ebony stopped pacing and looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She twisted a diamond ring the size of a grape on her finger. A ring that probably cost more than my first car. "It was a bad investment, Tiana," she said. "Brad had a sure thing. A crypto venture. It was supposed to triple our money in a month. But the market crashed, and the investors are angry. These are dangerous people." "How much?" I repeated. The room went silent. The only sound was the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. My father Marcus stepped forward from the fireplace where he had been standing like a statue. $9 million, he said. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Brad, who was now holding his head in his hands. "You lost $9 million of other people's money?" I asked. "It is actually more like 12, Brad whispered. "But we raised some. We just need 9 million to stop them from going to the authorities or doing something worse." I let out a short, harsh laugh. I could not help it. The audacity was breathtaking. "So you want me to do what exactly? Advise you on bankruptcy? I can recommend a good criminal defense lawyer." "No," my father roared, his voice booming off the high ceilings. "We do not need a lawyer. We need cash. We need liquidity." I stared at him. "You cannot be serious. I do not have $9 million lying around, Dad. I am successful, but I am not a hedge fund." "We know what you have," my mother interjected, her voice suddenly sharp. "We know you have been saving for that firm of yours. Your portfolio is worth at least 4 million. And your penthouse. If you leverage everything, we can get halfway there. We can take out a second mortgage on this house for the rest." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They had already done the math. They had counted my money before I even walked in the door. "You want me to liquidate my life?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want me to sell my home, my stocks, the capital I saved for 10 years to start my own business, all to clean up Brad's mess. It is not a mess. It is a temporary setback, Ebony screamed. She stomped her foot like a toddler. Brad is a genius. He will make it back. We just need a bridge loan. You are my sister, Tiana. You are supposed to protect me. I looked at my sister. She was 32 years old and had never worked a day in her life. She was wearing a Hermes belt and carrying a limited edition bag. Sell your bag, I said, pointing to the orange purse on the chair. Sell that ring. Sell the G-Wagon parked outside. Sell the vacation home in Aspen. We cannot do that. Ebony gasped, clutching her pearls. It would take too long, and people would talk. If we start selling assets, everyone will know we are in trouble. We have a reputation to maintain, Tiana. A reputation, I scoffed. You are worried about your reputation when your husband is apparently involved with loan sharks. Brad is not a criminal, my father snapped, stepping between us. He is a businessman who took a risk, and he is the future of this family. He has given us connections you could only dream of. The future of the family. The words cut deep. I was the one who graduated top of my class. I was the one who built a career from nothing without asking them for a dime. But Brad, the man who played golf and talked big, was the future. I will not do it, I said firmly. I will not give you a single cent. If Brad owes money, he needs to figure it out. Maybe he should get a job. The slap of the glass against the wall shattered the tension. My father had thrown his Scotch glass right past my head. It smashed against the floral wallpaper, leaving a wet amber stain. You selfish, ungrateful girl, he shouted, his face turning a dark shade of purple. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. And now, when your family faces ruin, you choose your bank account over your own blood. It is not my blood that lost the money. I countered, my heart pounding in my chest, but my voice remaining steady. It is your precious son-in-law. He is family, my mother wailed. Tiana, you are single. You have no children. What do you need all that money for anyway? You can earn it back. Ebony has babies. She has a life to protect. There it was. The truth that had always been unspoken. My life, my hard work, my dreams mattered less because I was a single woman. In their eyes, I was just a resource to be harvested for the benefit of the golden child. I picked up my briefcase. I am leaving. Do not call me until you are ready to apologize. And Brad, I suggest you turn yourself in. Federal prison is safer than loan sharks. You walk out that door and you are no longer my daughter. My father threatened, pointing a shaking finger at me. I will cut you off. You will be dead to us. I looked at him, at the man I had spent my whole life trying to impress. I looked at my mother, who was looking at me with pure hatred. I looked at my sister, who was checking her reflection in the mirror even while crying. I think I have been dead to you for a long time, Dad, I said. I just finally noticed. I turned and walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently. I walked to my car in the rain, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys. I thought the worst was over. I thought I had drawn a line in the sand, and they would have to find another victim. I was wrong. I drove home to my penthouse in downtown Atlanta. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights. I felt a mix of grief and relief. It was done. I was free of them. I went to sleep that night thinking about the future. I would launch my own firm next month. I would build something that was mine, something they could not touch. I put on my sharpest blazer. I grabbed my laptop. I walked out the door. The war had just begun, and unlike them, I was not fighting for a G-Wagon or a reputation. I was fighting for justice, and I was going to burn their entire fake empire to the ground. I dialed the bank with fingers so numb they felt like they belonged to someone else. The automated voice seemed to mock me with its cheerful greeting. I bypassed the menu and demanded to speak to the fraud department. My voice was trembling, but I forced it steady. I am a forensic accountant. I know how to speak to banks. I know the codes. I know the language. I need to report an unauthorized wire transfer, I said as soon as a human being picked up. My entire portfolio was liquidated and transferred to a third-party account. Freeze it. Freeze everything now. There was a pause on the other end, the clicking of a keyboard. Then the representative came back on the line and her voice was dangerously calm. The kind of calm they use when they are talking to a customer who is confused. Miss Vance, I see the transaction here. It cleared 3 hours ago. It was not unauthorized. Excuse me. I snapped, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I did not authorize a transfer of $4 million. I did not sign anything. I did not approve this. You did not have to, the representative said. The transfer was initiated in person at our Buckhead branch by a Mr. Marcus Vance. He presented a general durable power of attorney. We have it on file. It is notarized and active. The world stopped spinning. The air left the room. Power of attorney. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 20 years old, a sophomore at Spelman College. I had collapsed in the dorms with a burst appendix. My father had rushed down to the hospital, his face pale with worry. He was my hero back then, the strong protector. He had handed me a stack of papers while the nurses were prepping me for surgery. Just standard forms, Tiana, he had said, smoothing my hair back from my sweaty forehead. The doctors need me to make decisions while you are under anesthesia, and I need to handle the insurance and the bills. Just sign here, baby girl. Daddy has got you. I had signed. I did not even read them. I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with my soul. I never revoked it. I never even thought about it again. For 14 years, that piece of paper had been sitting in a safe somewhere, a loaded gun pointing right at my future, waiting for him to pull the trigger. He did not just steal my money, he weaponized my trust. He weaponized the love of a 20-year-old daughter for her father. I hung up the phone. I did not say goodbye. I walked to my closet and put on my shoes. I did not feel sad anymore. I felt cold, a deep, freezing cold that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. I drove to my parents' house in a trance. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and gray. I drove past the boutiques and the five-star restaurants of Buckhead, the world my father was so desperate to belong to. He wanted to be a king in this town, and he had just sacrificed his firstborn daughter to keep his crown. When I pulled into the driveway, I expected to see a house in mourning. I expected to see shame. I expected to see them huddled together, terrified of what they had done. Instead, I heard music, jazz, smooth, celebratory jazz drifting from the open windows. I walked up the front steps and pushed open the heavy oak doors. They were unlocked. The scene in the living room stopped me dead in my tracks. They were celebrating. My mother Viola was sitting on the sofa, laughing, her head thrown back. She held a crystal flute of champagne. Ebony was holding court in the center of the room, looking at travel brochures on her iPad. Brad, the man who had supposedly been fearing for his life 12 hours ago, was pouring a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon. And my father stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of cognac, looking like the lord of the manor. They looked happy. They looked relieved. They looked like a family who had just won the lottery. Brad saw me first. He raised his glass and grinned. A wide, arrogant grin that made my stomach turn. "Hey, look who it is," he announced. "The savior of the family. Come in, Tiana. Have a drink. We are toasting to the future." My father turned. He did not look ashamed. He looked defiant. He looked me in the eye and took a sip of his drink. "You figured it out," he stated. It was not a question. "You stole $4 million from me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the jazz music like a knife. "You used a medical power of attorney from 14 years ago to steal my life savings." "We did not steal it," my mother chimed in from the sofa. She waved her hand dismissively, the diamonds on her wrist catching the light. "We borrowed it. It is a family loan." "Do not be so dramatic, Tiana. A loan," I repeated. "A loan is something you ask for. A loan has terms. A loan has consent. This is grand larceny. This is fraud. It is survival." my father boomed, stepping forward. His voice had that preacher cadence he used when he wanted to shut down an argument. I did what a patriarch does. I made a hard decision to save this family from ruin. Brad was in danger. Our reputation was in danger. I protected the pack. You protected yourself, I shot back. You sacrificed me to protect your ego. That money was my business capital. That was 10 years of 80-hour weeks. That was my blood and sweat. And what were you going to do with it? Viola asked, standing up. She smoothed her silk dress and looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. Look at you, Tiana. You are 34 years old. You are single. You have no husband. You have no children. You live in that cold apartment all by yourself with your spreadsheets and your calculators. She took a step closer, and her perfume filled my nose, overpowering and sweet. Why do you need $4 million? She asked, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. You have no legacy. You have no one to leave it to. When you die, Tiana, who gets it? The government. A charity. Ebony has babies, she continued, gesturing to my sister. She has a family. She has a future. Brad is building something. They need that money. You are just hoarding it. Consider this your contribution. Consider this your way of finally being useful to this family since you refuse to give us grandchildren. I stared at my mother. The woman who birthed me. The woman I had sent to spas and bought cars for. She was looking at me like I was a defective appliance. Because I was not married, because I did not have children, my labor meant nothing. My security meant nothing. I was just a vessel to be drained to keep the golden child afloat. I looked at Ebony. She refused to meet my eyes. She was busy admiring her ring again. We saved you, I said to her. I saved you from loan sharks. And this is how you thank me. Brad laughed. It was a wet, condescending sound. He walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. I flinched away from his touch like he was radioactive. Relax, sis, he said. You are looking at this all wrong. This is an investment. That crypto project. It is going to bounce back. I have a new strategy. I am going to take that 4 million and turn it into 40 million by next year. You will get your money back with interest. You should be thanking me. I am doing you a favor managing your assets. You clearly were just letting them sit there doing nothing. The arrogance was suffocating. Here was a man who had lost $9 million of other people's money, standing in my father's house, drinking my father's liquor, telling me how to manage finances. He was a failure, a parasite. But because he was a white man in a suit, my father looked at him with awe. I looked at my father, the man I had idolized. You really believe him, I asked. You really believe he is going to double the money? Or do you just need to believe him because the alternative is admitting you just destroyed your daughter for nothing? My father set his glass down hard on the mantelpiece. Enough, he growled. It is done, Tiana. The money is gone. It is invested. You can stand here and cry about it, or you can sit down, shut up, and support this family. Those are your choices. I looked around the room. I looked at the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the happy, smiling faces of my sister and her husband. I realized then that I had already lost. I had not just lost my money. I had lost the illusion. For years I thought if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, if I was perfect enough, they would finally respect me. They would finally see me as equal to Ebony. But it was never about merit. It was never about success. To them, I was just an ATM. I was a resource. I was the mule who plowed the field so the racehorse could run free. And now that the mule had served its purpose, they expected me to go back to the barn and be quiet. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was a quiet, final severing of the tie that bound me to these people. The anger that had been boiling in my gut cooled down into something solid and sharp. It turned into focus. I am a forensic accountant. I destroy criminals for a living. I find the money they hide. I find the lies they tell. I send people to federal prison who are 10 times smarter and richer than Brad and my father. They had invited the wolf into the hen house, and they thought because they shared blood with the wolf they were safe. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my blazer. I picked up my purse. I am not going to sit down, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. It was flat and professional. It was the voice I used when I testified in court. And I am not going to support this family. Not anymore. You are walking out, my mother asked, her eyes narrowing. You are going to turn your back on us. No, mother, I said. I am not turning my back. I am facing forward. I looked at Brad. He was smirking. He thought he had won. He thought he was untouchable. Enjoy the champagne, Brad, I said softly. Drink it all. Then I looked at my father. He was glaring at me, trying to intimidate me with his eyes, trying to summon that old authority that used to make me tremble when I was a child. It did not work anymore. I saw him for what he was. A small, scared man who had sold his own child to buy a little more time in a fantasy world. You used a power of attorney that was meant for a medical emergency to commit wire fraud, I told him. You think because you are my father that makes it legal. It does not. You would not dare, he whispered. You would not put your own father in jail. Watch me, I said. I turned to the door. You walk out that door, Tiana, and you are dead to us, Ebony screamed, losing her composure for the first time. Do not expect an invite to the gala. Do not expect to see your nieces and nephews. You are nothing without us. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. I looked back at them one last time. This tableau of greed and delusion. You are right, I said. I am nothing to you, just a bank account. I opened the door. The cool night air rushed in, clearing the scent of lilies and cognac. But you forgot one thing, I said, looking directly at my father. You taught me to count every penny. And you just spent the last dollars of your lives. I walked out and closed the door behind me. I did not run. I walked to my car calmly. I got in and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment in the silence. I pulled out my phone. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past my family group chat. I scrolled past my friends. I found the number for the special agent in charge at the Atlanta field office of the FBI. I did not call him yet, not from the driveway. I started the engine and backed out. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The lights of the mansion were blazing. They were probably pouring another round, laughing at how I had folded, laughing at how easy it was. They had no idea that I had already begun the audit, and when I audit a life, I do not leave a single receipt unturned. I drove into the night, my mind already organizing the evidence, the power of attorney, the bank records, the text messages, the lifestyle audits. They wanted a war. They wanted to talk about legacy. I was going to give them a legacy they would never forget. I drove toward the city, toward the federal building, toward the only justice that mattered anymore. The gloves were off, and I was coming for everything. For the first time in 10 years, my debit card was declined. I was standing in line at a bodega 3 blocks from my penthouse trying to buy a carton of milk and a loaf of bread. The cashier, a teenager with headphones around his neck, looked at me with bored pity. "Insufficient funds, lady," he mumbled, popping his gum. "Do you have another card?" I stared at the little plastic rectangle in my hand. It was a platinum card. It was supposed to represent status, security, and success. Now it was just a piece of scrap plastic. "No," I whispered. "I do not." I dug through my purse, finding a crumpled $10 bill at the bottom. It was the last cash I had on me. I paid for the groceries and walked out into the humid Atlanta air. My car was parked in the garage, but the gas light was on and I could not afford to fill the tank of a Mercedes with premium fuel. So I walked. I walked past the high-end cafes where I used to buy $6 lattes without blinking. I walked past the dry cleaners where my suits were waiting, suits I could not afford to pick up. My father had not just taken my savings. He had taken my liquidity. He had taken my ability to move. He had grounded me. I got back to my apartment, which felt more like a cage now than a sanctuary. The rent was paid through the end of the month, but after that I was looking at eviction. The irony was suffocating. I spent my days tracking millions of dollars for the FBI, yet I was eating a peanut butter sandwich for dinner because my own father had robbed me blind. I sat on my Italian leather sofa eating my sandwich and opened my laptop. I needed to see what they were doing. I needed to see the enemy. I logged onto Instagram. I did not follow my sister Ebony anymore, but her profile was public. She wanted the world to see her life. She needed the validation like oxygen. There was a new notification. A live stream started 5 minutes ago. I clicked on it. Ebony face filled the screen. She was glowing. Her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost $2,000. She was holding up her hand, showing off a diamond ring that caught the light of the ring light perfectly. "Hey guys," she chirped, her voice high and fake. "I just wanted to jump on here and share some blessings. God is so good. We have been praying for a breakthrough and it finally happened. My husband Brad just closed a massive deal. We are talking next level." She turned the camera. Brad was sitting in the background, grinning like a Cheshire cat. He was wearing a new watch. A Patek Philippe. I zoomed in on the screen. That watch cost $50,000. "Tell them, baby," Ebony squealed. Brad leaned in. "Just a little tech venture," he said, trying to sound humble and failing miserably. "We are disrupting the market. Big things coming. We are actually heading to the dealership later to pick up the new McLaren. Hard work pays off, folks." I felt the bile rise in my throat. Hard work. He was talking about my hard work. My 80-hour weeks, my missed holidays, my life. He was wearing my blood, sweat, and tears on his wrist and calling it a blessing from God. They were not paying off loan sharks. They were not scared for their lives. That entire performance in the living room, the tears, the shaking, the terror, it was all a lie. It was a script. They stole $4 million to go shopping. I slammed the laptop shut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over there and burn that house down. But that is what they expected. They expected emotional Tiana. They expected the angry black woman who would make a scene and get arrested. I took a deep breath. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I drank it slowly, forcing my heart rate down. I am a forensic accountant. I do not get mad. I get evidence. I went back to my desk. I opened my professional software, the kind civilians cannot access, the kind that tracks digital footprints across the globe. My father had used a power of attorney to transfer the money, but money leaves a trail. It always leaves a trail. Even when you think you have scrubbed it clean, there is always a smudge, a digital fingerprint, a ghost in the machine. I pulled up the transaction history again. The money had gone to Brad Tech Ventures LLC. I ran a search on the LLC. It was registered in Delaware 2 days ago. The registered agent was a generic corporate service, but the signatory was Brad. "Okay, Brad. Let us see where you moved it." I started tracing. It is tedious work. It is like untangling a necklace made of thousands of tiny chains. You have to follow every link. Most of the money was still sitting in the LLC account, which meant they were spending it directly. That was sloppy. Criminals usually layer it. They move it through 5 or 6 shell companies to hide the source. But Brad was arrogant. He thought because he stole it legally using the power of attorney, he did not have to hide it. But then I saw something strange. There was a series of smaller transfers entering the Brad Tech account from a different source. I squinted at the screen. Incoming wire. $50,000. Incoming wire. $100,000. Incoming wire. $25,000. These were recent. Within the last month. Before they stole my money. Who else was giving Brad money? I traced the routing numbers. They were coming from a local bank in Atlanta. A community bank. The kind that handles small businesses and personal accounts. I hacked deeper. I know I am not supposed to say that. Let us just say I utilized my access to certain databases that are usually reserved for law enforcement. I needed to see the account holder. The name popped up on the screen and my blood ran cold. Grace Chapel Retirement Fund. I sat back in my chair. Grace Chapel. That was my parents' church. The church where my father was the head deacon. The church where my mother led the choir. It was a pillar of the Black elite community in Atlanta. Doctors, lawyers, judges, they all went to Grace Chapel. And they trusted my father. I looked at the transaction dates. The transfers from the church fund to Brad's company started 6 months ago. They started small, 10,000 here, 5,000 there, testing the waters. Then they got bigger. Brad was not just a failed entrepreneur. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was taking money from the church elders, promising them high returns on some fake crypto investment, and he was funneling it into his own pockets. And my father was helping him. It all made sense now. The desperation in the living room. The $9 million figure. It was not loan sharks. It was a hole. They had drained the church fund dry. They had probably spent it all on their lavish lifestyle, the cars, the clothes, the vacations. And now the auditors were coming. Or maybe a payout was due to a retiree. They needed $9 million to plug the hole in the church fund before anyone noticed. They stole my life savings not to pay off a debt, but to cover up a crime. They sacrificed their own daughter to save their reputation at church. I felt a new kind of anger. This was not just personal anymore. This was predatory. These were people who had worked their whole lives, grandmothers who tithed every Sunday, grandfathers who had marched for civil rights. My father and his white son-in-law were robbing them blind. I printed everything. Every ledger, every transfer, every date. I worked through the night. I did not sleep. I did not eat. I was fueled by a cold, hard rage. By the time the sun came up over Atlanta, I had a stack of papers 3 inches thick. I had the entire map of their crime. I needed coffee. Real coffee. Not the instant stuff I had in my pantry. I showered and put on my sunglasses to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I grabbed my bag with the evidence and headed out. I needed to clear my head before I called Agent Miller. This was big. This was prison time for my whole family, big. I walked to a coffee shop a few blocks away. The morning rush was in full swing. People in suits, people with places to go. I used to be one of them. Now I was a ghost walking among them. I ordered a black coffee and paid with the last few dollars in my purse. I walked out to the patio and sat down. I watched the cars go by. I saw a McLaren drive past, a bright, obnoxious orange. It might have been Brad. It probably was. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "Excuse me." I looked up. A woman was standing in front of my table. She was young, maybe late 20s, but she looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing a trench coat that looked too big for her. She was clutching a large envelope to her chest. I lowered my sunglasses. "Can I help you?" "Are you Tiana Vance?" she asked, her voice shaking. I tensed. "Who are you?" "My name is Sarah," she said, looking over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to be following her. "I used to work for Brad. I was his executive assistant." I stared at her. "Why are you talking to me, Sarah?" She pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. She put the envelope on the table and pushed it toward me. "Because I saw the news," she whispered. "I follow your sister on Instagram. I saw the ring. I saw the car. And I know they stole that money from you." "How do you know that?" I asked, keeping my face stone. "Because I know they were broke," Sarah said. "I know because I was the one who had to tell the landlord the rent was late for the office. I was the one who had to lie to the investors when they called asking where their returns were." She leaned in closer, her eyes wide with fear. "Brad is not a businessman, Tiana. He is a monster. He has been running this scam for 2 years. He targets the church members because your father vouches for him. He uses your father's name to get them to sign over their pensions." I nodded slowly. "I know. I figured it out last night." "You do not know everything," she said. "It is worse than just money." She tapped the envelope. "He has been recording them. Brad. He records every conversation with your father. He has leverage. He has been blackmailing your father for months, forcing him to recruit more investors from the church. Your father tried to stop. He tried to pull out. But Brad told him if he stopped, he would leak the emails proving your father knew about the fraud from day one." My stomach twisted. My father was not just a willing participant, he was a hostage. but a hostage who had chosen to sacrifice his daughter to save himself. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Because he fired me yesterday. After he got your money, he told me he did not need me anymore." He laughed at me, Tiana. He said he hit the jackpot and he was upgrading everything, including his staff. He owes me 3 months of back pay. I have a kid. She looked up and her eyes were filled with tears. "But mostly I am giving this to you because I am scared. He is dangerous. He is not just a white-collar criminal. He has friends. Bad friends. When I threatened to go to the police, he told me he knew where my son goes to school." I reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy. "You are safe now," I told her. "I am going to the FBI." "You have to be careful," she said, standing up. "He is dragging your whole family down to hell, Tiana. And he is enjoying it. He calls your father his golden goose. He laughs about how easy it was to take your money. He said you were too smart for your own good, but you had a blind spot for family." "He was right," I said, standing up as well. "I did have a blind spot." I put my sunglasses back on. "But now I see everything." Sarah nodded and hurried away, disappearing into the morning crowd. I stood there on the sidewalk, clutching the envelope. I had the bank records. Now I had the internal communications. I had the blackmail. I looked at my phone. I had a missed call from my mother. And a text from Ebony. "Thinking of you, sis. Hope you aren't too mad. We love you." I looked at the text and felt nothing. No love, no anger, just cold determination. They thought I was broke. They thought I was beaten. They did not know I was holding the match that would burn their house of cards to ash. I walked to the curb and hailed a cab. I did not have cash for it, but I would figure it out. I would have the FBI pay for it. I was a key witness now. "Take me to the federal building," I told the driver. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "You look like you are on a mission, lady." "You have no idea," I said. As the cab merged into traffic, I opened the envelope Sarah had given me. The first page was a printed email from Brad to my father dated 6 months ago. Subject: The Goose. The text was short. "Keep the money flowing, Marcus, or everyone at Grace Chapel finds out you are stealing from the collection plate. Do not make me hurt you. Love, your favorite son." I closed my eyes. My father had sold his soul to a devil in a designer suit, and when the bill came due, he paid it with my life. We pulled up to the federal building. The concrete barricades and the armed guards looked welcoming to me. This was my world. This was where the rules still applied. I got out of the cab. I walked up the steps. It was time to introduce Brad and my father to the only higher power that could help them now: the United States Justice Department. I sat in the back of the taxi, clutching the heavy envelope Sarah had given me like it was a bomb that had already detonated. My hands were trembling, but my mind was operating with the cold precision of a surgeon. I needed a secure location to process this. I could not go back to my apartment. They had keys. They had access. I directed the driver to my new office space. It was a modest suite in a high-rise downtown that I had leased 2 weeks ago for my new firm. Nobody in my family knew about it. It was the only sanctuary I had left. Once I was inside, behind 2 locked doors and a security system, I finally poured the contents of the envelope onto my desk. It was a chaotic mess of spreadsheets, printed emails, and bank statements, but to a forensic accountant, it was a roadmap to hell. I spent the next 3 hours reconstructing the anatomy of the crime. Sarah was right. It was a Ponzi scheme, classic and brutal. But the scale of it made my stomach churn. Brad had set up an investment fund called Kingdom Growth Capital, targeting religious organizations. The pitch was perfect. High returns, ethical investing, keeping the wealth within the community. It was designed to appeal to the wealthy Black congregations of Atlanta, specifically Grace Chapel. I picked up a ledger sheet. The numbers were staggering. Over the last 2 years, Grace Chapel had funneled nearly $25 million of their retirement fund and building capital into Brad's company. But here was the smoking gun. Here was the knife in my heart. I found a spreadsheet titled Commission Structure. Beside every large deposit from the church, there was a corresponding payout. 5% of every $1 million invested went to a shell company called MV Consulting. MV, Marcus Vance. My father was not just a victim. He was not just a hostage being blackmailed. He was on the payroll. I felt bile rise in my throat. My father, the head deacon, the man who stood in the pulpit on Sundays and prayed for the prosperity of his flock, was taking a 5% cut for leading his own congregation to the slaughter. He had used his reputation, his standing in the black elite, to vouch for a white con artist who was robbing his friends blind. I read the emails between them. They were nauseating. Email from Marcus to Brad dated 1 year ago. Subject: the Jones family. Text: Dr. Jones is hesitant about the pension transfer. I told him you are a genius. I told him God put you in our lives to bless us. He is signing the check tomorrow. Do not forget my fee. I have eyes on a new boat. My father had sold out Dr. Jones, the man who delivered me when I was born, for a boat. I understood now why he was so desperate, why he had stolen my $4 million. The $9 million figure was not a debt to loan sharks, it was a deficit. I found a letter from the IRS in the stack. Grace Chapel was scheduled for a federal audit in 2 weeks. The auditors were coming to verify the assets. If they looked at the accounts and saw they were empty, the game was over. They needed $9 million to make the accounts look solvent, just long enough to pass the audit. My life savings, my hard work, my future was being used to paint over a crime scene. They were not trying to save their lives. They were trying to save their skins from federal prison. I stared at the wall of my empty office. I felt a profound sense of grief, not for the money, but for the father I thought I had. The man who raised me was a fiction. The real Marcus Vance was a predator who preyed on his own people. And my mother, she had to know. The cars, the clothes, the renovations. You do not live that large on a deacon's salary. She was complicit in her silence, enjoying the spoils of war while her neighbors were being robbed. I was so absorbed in the horror of the evidence that I did not hear the elevator ding in the hallway. I did not hear the footsteps approaching my suite. The glass door to my office rattled. I jumped, covering the papers instinctively. I looked up. Brad was standing on the other side of the glass. He was wearing a casual polo shirt and slacks, looking like he had just come from the golf course. He smiled when he saw me. It was a predator smile. He tapped on the glass with his signet ring. "Open up, Tiana," he shouted, his voice muffled by the soundproofing. "We need to chat." My heart hammered against my ribs. How did he find me? Then I remembered. My phone. I was still on the family plan. My father paid the bill. They had tracked my GPS. I considered calling the police right then, but I paused. I needed to know how far they were willing to go. I needed them to hang themselves. I walked over and unlocked the door. Brad strode in like he owned the place. He looked around the empty office with a sneer. "So this is the new empire, huh? A little small, isn't it? Not really worthy of a $4 million investment." "Get out, Brad," I said, moving back behind my desk, putting distance between us. I stood protectively over the pile of evidence. He laughed, walking around the room, touching the walls, running his finger along the windowsill. "You are a smart girl, Tiana. I always said that. Too smart for your own good. You figured it out, didn't you? That is why you stormed out last night. You followed the money." I stayed silent. I reached under my desk and pressed the button on my voice recorder. I always kept one taped there for client meetings. "I know about Grace Chapel," I said. "I know about the audit. I know you and my father are stealing from the elderly to buy sports cars." Brad stopped pacing. He turned to me and his face changed. The charm evaporated, leaving something cold and ugly underneath. "It is not stealing, Tiana. It is borrowing. We are going to pay it back. Once the market turns, we will make everyone whole. Your 4 million is just a bridge. It is a loan. It is fraud, I corrected, and I am going to the FBI. I have the receipts, Brad. I have Sarah's files. He flinched at Sarah's name. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. Poor Sarah. She really is a disgruntled employee. Did she tell you she tried to sleep with me? Did she tell you she fabricated those files because I rejected her? That is what we will say, you know. It does not matter what you say, I told him. The bank records do not lie. My father's commission checks do not lie. Brad walked over to my desk. He leaned over, placing his hands on the surface looming over me. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. You are not going to the FBI, Tiana. You are going to sit here, and you are going to be a good daughter. You are going to let us use that money to fix this mess. And in a month, when the audit is done, we will start paying you back. And if I don't, I challenged, meeting his gaze. He smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. If you don't, then I'm going to have to destroy you. I laughed. It was a nervous sound, but it angered him. You can try, Brad. But I am clean. My record is spotless. Is it? He asked softly. Are you sure about that? Because I have been hearing some rumors, Tiana. Worrisome rumors. People are saying the stress of starting a new firm has gotten to you. People are saying you have developed a bit of a habit. My eyes widened. What are you talking about? Prescription pills, Brad said, casually examining his fingernails. Maybe a little cocaine to get through those long nights. It is a tragedy, really. A brilliant forensic accountant spiraling into addiction. If that got out, if someone were to find drugs in your apartment or your car, well, your license would be revoked immediately. No firm would hire you. Your testimony in court would be worthless. I froze. He was threatening to frame me. You wouldn't, I whispered. I would do whatever it takes to protect my family, he hissed, leaning in until his face was inches from mine. And make no mistake, Tiana, I am the family now. Your father knows this. He agrees. We talked about it this morning. If you try to sink us, we will make sure you go down first. We will ruin your reputation so thoroughly that you won't be able to get a job doing taxes at a strip mall. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My father knew. My father had agreed to frame his own daughter as a drug addict to save himself. The betrayal was complete. There was nothing left to save. Brad straightened up, adjusting his collar. So here is the deal. You are going to keep your mouth shut. You are going to let us use the money. You are going to smile at the church picnic next Sunday. And if you do that, maybe we let you keep your license. Maybe we let you have a career. He turned and walked toward the door. Think about it, sis. Do not make us do something we will all regret. He walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding like a drum. I looked down at the recorder under my desk. The red light was still blinking. He had just confessed. He had just threatened a witness. He had just given me everything I needed. But he had also terrified me. He was desperate. And he had my father on his side. They had access to my apartment, my car, my life. If they planted drugs, if they called the cops, I would be fighting a battle on two fronts. I needed to move fast. I could not wait for the audit. I could not wait for them to make the next move. I grabbed the evidence. I grabbed the recorder. I put everything into my briefcase. I was not going to let them frame me. I was not going to let them win. I walked out of my office and locked the door. I took the stairs down all 20 floors, avoiding the elevator, just in case he was waiting. I emerged onto the street. The sun was shining, but the world looked dark to me. I hailed a cab. Take me to the FBI field office, I told the driver, and hurry. As the car pulled away, I looked back at my building. I wondered if Brad was watching. I wondered if my father was watching. Let them watch. They thought they had broken me. They thought fear would keep me silent. They forgot that forensic accountants are patient. We are methodical, and we know that in the end the numbers always tell the truth. I clutched my briefcase to my chest. Inside was the end of their world. I was done being the victim. Today I was the executioner. Brad thought fear would paralyze me, but he forgot that fear is a fuel when you know how to burn it. I left my office with my briefcase clutching the evidence of their crimes against my chest, but I did not go into hiding. I went on the offensive. They wanted to ruin my reputation and paint me as an addict. Well, two could play at the destruction game, but I did not need lies. I had the banking system on my side. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away, and pulled out my tablet. I still had authorized user access to my parents' primary checking account, a relic from when I used to manage their bills, because they were too incompetent to do it themselves. I did not take their money. I did something far more damaging. I called the fraud department of their bank. "This is Tiana Vance," I said, my voice steady and professional. "I am a joint account holder on the Vance Family Trust. I have reason to believe the account has been compromised by a third party involved in a federal investigation regarding money laundering. I need you to flag all outgoing transactions immediately. Yes, lock it down. Code red." It took 10 minutes. With a few keywords like federal investigation and money laundering, the bank manager's panic set in. Banks are terrified of the feds. They would rather freeze $1 million than risk a single fine. One by one, I called every institution where my name was attached to theirs. I flagged the credit cards. I flagged the investment accounts. I flagged the equity line on their house. I watched the dominoes fall in my mind. They thought they were rich. They thought they had $9 million of stolen church money and my $4 million of savings to play with. But liquidity is a fragile thing. And I had just turned the tap off. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the platinum credit card I had given my mother 5 years ago for emergencies. It was a supplementary card on my account, one I had forgotten to cancel in the chaos of yesterday. Transaction attempted. $4,500. Hermes Boutique. Phipps Plaza. Status declined. Fraud alert. I stared at the screen and a bitter smile touched my lips. My mother was shopping. Her husband was blackmailing me. Her son-in-law was threatening my life, and she was buying a scarf. The level of delusion was almost impressive. I knew exactly where she was. Phipps Plaza was the playground of the Atlanta elite, and my mother treated the Hermes store like her second living room. I started the engine. I was not running away anymore. I wanted to see the look on her face when the house of cards started to shake. I drove to the mall, navigating the parking garage with aggressive precision. I walked through the polished glass doors of the luxury wing, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble floors. I saw her through the window of the boutique, Viola Vance in all her glory. She was wearing a cream-colored suit and a hat that probably cost more than my first apartment. She was standing at the counter holding a bright orange bag, and she was screaming at the sales associate. "Do you know who I am?" she shrieked, waving the platinum card in the poor girl's face. "I am Viola Vance. My husband is a deacon. Run it again. This machine is broken." I stepped into the store. The air was cool and smelled of expensive leather. The other customers were staring, whispering behind their hands. This was the nightmare of the black elite public embarrassment. "It is not the machine, mother," I said, my voice cutting through her tirade. Viola spun around. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. For a second, she looked relieved, like I was there to fix it just like I always did. "Tiana." Thank God, she huffed, smoothing her jacket. "Tell this incompetent girl who we are. The card is not working. You need to call the bank and authorize the charge. I need this bag for the church luncheon tomorrow." I walked up to the counter. I looked at the sales associate, who looked like she was about to cry. "I am sorry for the disturbance," I told the girl. "You can cancel the transaction, and you can cut that card. It has been reported stolen." My mother's jaw dropped. She looked at me like I had grown a second head. "Stolen," she sputtered. "What are you talking about? You gave me that card." "I did," I replied calmly, "when I thought you were a mother. But since you are actually an accomplice to grand larceny, I revoked your privileges." Viola turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my blazer. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed low enough so the clerk would not hear. "Fix this. Now. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Everyone is watching. Let them watch, I said, pulling my arm away. Maybe they should know that the clothes on your back were bought with stolen pension funds. Maybe they should know that your luxury life is built on the backs of the elderly people you pray with every Sunday. Stop it, Viola snapped, looking around frantically. You are talking crazy. We did what we had to do to save the family, and you are going to pay for this, Tiana. Brad told us what you are doing, threatening us, trying to ruin us. Brad is a con artist, mother, I said, stepping closer to her. And you are broke. The accounts are frozen. The cash is gone. You do not have a dime to your name. She stared at me, breathing hard. Her eyes darted to the bag on the counter, then back to me. The reality was starting to sink in. Not the moral reality, she was immune to that. But the financial reality. She could not buy the bag. You cut us off, she whispered. Your own parents. You cut me off first, I reminded her. You stole my future. You stole my hard work. Did you think I would just roll over? Did you think I would let you spend my money on silk scarves while I eat peanut butter? I turned to walk away. I had seen enough. I had seen the fear in her eyes, and it gave me no pleasure, only a cold sense of justice. Where are you going? She screamed, losing all control. Do not you walk away from me. I am your mother. You owe me. You owe me everything. I stopped and turned back. The store was dead silent. Every eye was on us. I walked back until I was inches from her face. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to be poised, to be perfect, to be a credit to the race, and I saw nothing but a hollow shell filled with greed. I do not owe you a thing, I said softly so only she could hear. But I will give you some advice. You should save those tears, mother, and you should save your pocket change. Because very soon you are going to need that money to buy ramen noodles at the commissary and federal prison. The slap echoed through the store like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned. The shock of it vibrated through my teeth. I slowly turned my head back. Viola was breathing heavy, her hand still raised, her chest heaving. She looked wild. She looked dangerous. But then I saw it, above the counter. The little blinking red light of the security camera. It had seen everything. The aggression. The assault. I did not hit her back. I did not scream. I reached up and touched my cheek. Thank you, I said. My voice was ice. That was the last piece of evidence I needed. Assault, on camera. Add that to the wire fraud and the racketeering. Viola's face crumbled. She realized what she had done. She looked at her hand, then at me, then at the camera. Tiana, wait, she stammered, reaching out. I did not mean it. I lost my temper. Please. I turned my back on her. I walked out of the store past the security guard who was hurrying over, past the whispering shoppers. I walked out into the mall concourse, my cheek throbbing but my head high. I had broken the cycle. She had raised her hand to me and I had not flinched. I had not apologized. I had let her show the world exactly who she was. I reached my car and got in, locking the doors immediately. I checked my face in the rear-view mirror. There was a red handprint blooming on my skin. I took a picture of it, time stamped, GPS location tagged, another receipt. I started the car, ready to drive to the FBI headquarters, ready to end this once and for all. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from my father. My heart hammered. Had she called him already? Was he calling to threaten me again? I picked up the phone. The message was short. Come home now. Brad is losing it. He found the gun. Tiana, please, he is going to hurt us. I stared at the screen. The gun. My father kept a snub-nosed revolver in his desk drawer for home protection. He had never fired it in his life. But Brad was desperate. Brad was cornered. And a cornered animal with a weapon is the most dangerous thing on earth. I looked at the FBI building address on my GPS. Then I looked at the message. It could be a trap. It could be another manipulation, a way to lure me back to the house so they could silence me. But what if it was not? What if the monster they had invited into their home had finally turned on them? I gripped the steering wheel. I hated them for what they had done to me. I hated them for the theft, for the lies, for the slap. But they were still my blood, and I knew that if I drove away and Brad pulled that trigger, I would never forgive myself. Not because they deserved saving, but because I was not like them. I did not trade lives for money. I typed a reply, calling 911, stay down. Then I threw the car into gear. I was not going to the FBI. Not yet. I was going back to the mansion, back to the scene of the crime. But I was not going alone. I hit the emergency dial on my dashboard. 911. What is your emergency? There is a man with a gun at 450 Blackland Road, I said, accelerating out of the garage. He has hostages, and he has threatened to kill them. Send everyone. I hung up and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The engine roared. Hang on, I whispered to the empty car. Just hang on. The final act was about to begin, and this time there would be no champagne. Only sirens. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the estate with my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not come alone. In the passenger seat sat Ken, a 6'4" former linebacker, who now ran a private security firm often contracted by the FBI for witness protection. I had called him the second I read my father's text about the gun. I was not walking into a hostage situation without backup. Stay close, I told Ken as we parked behind my father's Bentley. If you hear screaming, come in. If you hear gunshots, do not wait for permission. I ran up the steps, my keys in my hand, prepared for chaos. I expected shattered glass. I expected shouting. I expected to see my father bleeding or Brad waving a pistol. I burst through the front door. Dad! I screamed. Where are you? The house was silent. The foyer was pristine. The chandelier sparkled overhead, casting rainbows on the marble floor. I rushed into the living room and stopped so fast my heels skidded on the rug. There was no gun. There was no hostage situation. My father was sitting in his favorite leather armchair sipping tea. My mother was arranging flowers in a vase. Ebony was scrolling on her phone on the sofa. And Brad was leaning against the mantelpiece eating an apple. They looked up as I entered. They did not look scared. They looked annoyed. You are late, Brad said, taking a bite of the apple. We expected you 10 minutes ago. I stared at them, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked at my father. He refused to meet my eyes. You said he had a gun, I whispered. You said he was going to kill you. My father sighed a long, weary sound that vibrated in his chest. He set his tea down. It was the only way to get you here, Tiana. You blocked our numbers. You froze our accounts. You embarrassed your mother in public. We had to do something drastic to make you listen. It was a lie, a manipulation. They had weaponized my fear for their safety to lure me back into their trap. I felt Ken step up behind me, his presence a wall of heat. Is everything secure, Ms. Vance? He asked, his hand hovering near his waist. Who is this? My mother demanded, standing up and smoothing her skirt. Why did you bring a stranger into our home? This is my security, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. Because you told me there was a gunman in the house. Brad laughed. He tossed the apple core into the fireplace. Relax, Tiana. Nobody is getting shot. We just need to have a family meeting. Send the gorilla away. I did not send Ken away. I signaled him to stand by the door. I walked into the center of the room. You are sick, I said, looking at my father. You are all sick. Sit down, Tiana, my father commanded, pointing to the ottoman. We are going to fix this. Tonight. I did not sit. I stood my ground. Fix what? The fact that you stole my life savings, or the fact that you are running a Ponzi scheme through the church. We are fixing the misunderstanding, my mother interrupted. She walked over to me, her face a mask of tragic sorrow. The slap from the mall was forgotten, replaced by the performance of a lifetime. Look at us, Tiana, she said, gesturing around the room. Look at your family. We are falling apart. Your father cannot sleep. Ebony is sick with worry. We love you so much, and it breaks our hearts to see you acting like this. Like an enemy. I am not the enemy, I said. I am the victim. You are the daughter my father boomed, and daughters make sacrifices. Do you remember when you were 7 and you wanted that expensive bicycle? I worked overtime for a month to buy it for you. Do you remember when you needed braces? I paid for them. I fed you. I clothed you. I put a roof over your head. I made you who you are. He stood up and walked toward me. He was not the terrifying patriarch anymore. He was playing the role of the weary old man carrying the weight of the world. I built this legacy for you, he said, his voice cracking perfectly. For all of you. All of. And now when I need you, when the family needs you just for a moment, you turn your back. You call the bank. You embarrass your mother. Is that how I raised you? To be heartless. It was classic gaslighting. He was rewriting history, making me the villain for protecting myself. But then came the pivot. We can put this all behind us, Brad said, stepping forward. He reached into his jacket pocket. He did not pull out a gun. He pulled out a folded document. The bank is asking questions, Tiana. Because of your little stunt with the fraud alert, they have frozen the transfer. The money is in limbo. The IRS is getting curious. If they investigate, they will freeze everything for months. We will lose the house. Brad will lose his company. The church fund will collapse. He held the paper out to me. This is a gift affidavit. It is a standard banking form. It just says that the $4 million transfer was a gift from you to your father. No strings attached. If you sign this, the bank releases the hold, the IRS goes away, we pay off the investors, the audit passes, and we all go back to being a happy family. I stared at the paper. It was a confession disguised as salvation. If I signed that, I was legally stating that I gave them the money voluntarily. I would never get it back. I would be complicit in their money laundering. And if I do not sign? I asked. Then we all go down, my mother said. She dropped to her knees. It was a shocking theatrical move. Viola Vance did not kneel for anyone but God. But there she was on the Persian rug, grasping my hand, her eyes wet with tears. Please, Tiana, she begged. Please save us. Do not send your father to prison. Do not send Brad away. Think of Ebony. Think of your future nieces and nephews. Do not be the reason this family is destroyed. Just sign the paper. Give us the money. You can make more money. You are smart. You are young. But you only have one family. I looked down at her. I looked at my father, who was wiping a fake tear from his eye. I looked at Ebony, who was watching me with breath held. They were terrified, not of losing me, but of losing the money. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to lose. If I fought them now, if I walked out again, they would run. Brad would take whatever cash he had left and disappear. My father would destroy the evidence. They would scatter like roaches. I needed them confident. I needed them arrogant. I needed them all in one place, feeling safe so I could drop the net. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble. I forced tears into my eyes. It was not hard. The grief was always there, just below the surface. I just wanted you to love me, I whispered, my voice breaking. We do love you, my mother cried, squeezing my hand. We love you more than anything. Just sign it, baby. Fix this. I looked at Brad. He was smirking, trying to hide it, but I saw the victory in his eyes. He thought he had broken me. He thought the guilt trip had worked. I took the paper. My hands were shaking. This part was real. I was terrified. I cannot sign this now, I said, wiping my eyes. I am too upset. I cannot think straight. Sign it. Tiana, my father urged, stepping closer. Do it now before you change your mind. No, I said, pulling the paper to my chest. I need to do this right. If I am going to give you everything, if I am going to save you, I need something in return. Anything, my mother promised, getting to her feet. Anything you want. I want us to be a family again, I said, looking at each of them. I want a dinner. A real family dinner. Here. Tomorrow night. I want everyone at the table. No secrets, no fighting, just us. A dinner, Brad asked, suspicious. Yes, I said. I want to cook. I want to make peace. And after dinner, when we are all together, when I feel like I am part of this family again, I will sign the paper. I will give you the money. But I need to know that I am buying my way back in. I need to know you are not just going to take it and throw me away again. My father exhaled a long breath of relief. He walked over and hugged me. It felt like being hugged by a snake, but I hugged him back. Of course, baby girl, he said. A dinner is a wonderful idea. The prodigal daughter returns. We will kill the fatted calf. We will celebrate, Brad said, clapping his hands. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, we will open the good wine. I nodded, sniffing. I wiped my face. Okay, I said. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. I will bring the papers, I will sign everything. I turned to leave. Ken opened the door for me, his face unreadable. I love you guys, I whispered to the room. We love you too, Tiana, my mother said. Now go get some rest. You look terrible. I walked out of the house. I walked down the steps. I got into the car. As we drove away, Ken looked at me in the rearview mirror. You know that was a load of bull back there, right? He said. They are playing you, Ms. Vance. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights. The tears on my face dried instantly. My expression hardened into stone. I know Ken, I said. I opened my briefcase and looked at the voice recorder I had kept running in my pocket. It had caught everything. The admission of the fraud, the coercion, the gift affidavit pitch. They think they are playing me, I told him. They think I am the weak little girl who needs her daddy. I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Miller. It is set, I said when he answered. Tomorrow night. 7 p.m. They will all be there, and they will be ready to sign. I am not the one getting played, Ken. I am setting the table, and tomorrow night they are going to eat exactly what they deserve. The interrogation room at the FBI field office did not smell like lilies and cognac. It smelled like stale coffee and justice. I sat across from Special Agent Miller and two auditors from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows on the metal table where I had laid out the autopsy of my family's crimes. I was not there as a daughter. I was there as a forensic accountant. I walked them through the paper trail with surgical precision. I showed them the initial unauthorized transfer initiated by my father using the expired power of attorney. I showed them the flow of funds into Brad's shell company. I laid out the spreadsheets Sarah had given me, the ones that proved the Kingdom Growth Capital Fund was nothing more than a Ponzi scheme built on the retirement savings of the Grace Chapel congregation. Agent Miller picked up the ledger showing my father's 5% commission on every stolen dollar. He looked at me, and his expression was grim. You understand what this means, Ms. Vance, he said. Your father is not just an accessory. He is a co-conspirator. He used his position in the church to solicit funds for a fraudulent enterprise. That is wire fraud, securities fraud, and elder abuse. I know, I said, my voice steady. I know exactly what it is. The IRS auditor, a woman with glasses and eyes like lasers, leaned forward. And the $4 million taken from your account, you are saying you did not authorize this. I did not, I replied, but I am willing to authorize it retroactively, under one condition. They all looked at me. This was the pivot point. This was where I stopped being a victim and started being the operator. I need immunity, I said. If I sign the papers my father wants me to sign tonight, I become part of the money laundering chain. I need a formal agreement that I am acting as a cooperating witness and a federal whistleblower. I need to know that when you seize their assets, my $4 million comes back to me first. Not as proceeds of crime, but as restitution. Agent Miller exchanged a look with the IRS team. They knew who I was. They knew my reputation. They knew I had done their job for them. I had handed them a high-profile case wrapped in a bow. We can do that, Miller said. But we need a confession. We need them to admit on record that they know the money is being used to cover up the fraud. We need to prove intent. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the trap I had spent all night designing. It was a thick document bound in a professional blue folder. On the top page was the gift affidavit, the simple one-page form my father and Brad were desperate for me to sign. It stated that the money was a gift with no repayment expected. It was exactly what they wanted. It was the bait. But attached underneath it, seamlessly integrated as an addendum, was a document titled Declaration of Source and Use of Funds. I slid it across the table to Miller. "This looks like standard banking compliance paperwork," I explained. "It requires the beneficiaries, meaning Brad and my father, to list exactly where the funds are going. I pre-filled it for them." Miller put on his reading glasses. He read the list out loud. Repayment of unauthorized withdrawals from Grace Chapel Pension Fund. Cover-up of insolvent positions in Kingdom Growth Capital. Personal payments to Marcus Vance for solicitation services. He looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "If they sign this," he said, "they are signing a confession to money laundering. They are admitting they know the business is a fraud and they are using your money to hide it." "Exactly," I said. "They are arrogant, Agent Miller, and they are desperate. They won't read the fine print. They will just see the gift affidavit on top and they will sign whatever is underneath to get their hands on the cash." Miller nodded. He looked at his watch. "The dinner is at 7. "Yes," I said. "I told them I would bring the papers. I told them we would celebrate." "We will have a team in the van down the street," Miller said. "You will be wearing a wire. As soon as they sign, you give the signal. We will handle the rest." I stood up. I felt cold but clear. There was no going back now. I was about to walk into my childhood home and serve my father up to the federal government. I went back to my office to prepare. I did not go home. I needed to look the part. I needed to look like the prodigal daughter returning to the fold. I put on a soft pink dress, the kind my mother always said made me look ladylike. It was non-threatening. It was the uniform of the obedient girl they wanted me to be. I spent an hour on my hair and makeup. I covered the dark circles under my eyes. I applied a soft blush. I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize myself. I looked soft. I looked pliable. It was the best disguise I had ever worn. I opened the blue folder one last time. I checked the pages. The gift affidavit was on top, crisp and white, inviting. The confession was underneath, buried in paragraphs of legal jargon. I took a pen from my desk. A heavy, expensive fountain pen. My father's favorite kind. I would let him use it. It seemed poetic. Then I prepared the technology. Agent Miller had given me a small recording device, but I did not trust it alone. I taped my own recorder to the inside of my purse. I set up a cloud backup on my phone that would upload audio in real time. I was not taking any chances. If the FBI equipment failed, I would have my own receipts. I sat in my chair and watched the sun go down over the Atlanta skyline. The city looked beautiful and distant. I thought about the people at Grace Chapel. Mrs. Johnson, who sat in the front pew every Sunday. Mr. Henderson, who had been the janitor for 40 years and was counting on that pension. My father had looked them in the eye and stolen their futures. He had bought boats and suits and vacations with their security, and he had expected me to pay for it. He called me selfish. He called me ungrateful. Tonight he was going to learn what those words really meant. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ebony. "Mom is making your favorite mac and cheese. We are opening the 1995 vintage. Hurry home, sis. We missed you." I stared at the message. They missed me. They missed my money. They missed the safety I provided. They were vultures circling a carcass, pretending it was a family reunion. I stood up. I grabbed the blue folder. I grabbed my purse. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. The ride down felt like a descent into the underworld. My car was waiting. I got in and drove toward Buckhead. The streets became wider, the lawns greener, the houses bigger. It was a landscape of wealth and privilege. But tonight it felt like a crime scene. I pulled up to the gate. It opened automatically. They were expecting me. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Every window was glowing. I could see silhouettes moving inside. They were setting the stage. I parked my car next to Brad's McLaren. The orange paint gleamed under the porch lights. It was a trophy of theft, a shiny object bought with stolen prayers. I took a deep breath. I checked my purse. The red light on the recorder was steady. The FBI van was parked 3 houses down, disguised as a utility repair truck. I knew Miller was listening. I checked my face in the mirror one last time. I forced a smile. It was a dazzling smile, a happy smile. The smile of a daughter who just wanted to be loved. I got out of the car. The night air was thick with humidity and the scent of jasmine. I walked up the steps. My heels clicked on the stone. This was it. The point of no return. I reached for the door handle. It was cool metal under my palm. Inside that house was my past. My family. The people who were supposed to protect me. And in my hand was the pen that would write their ending. I pushed the door open. "Tiana." My mother's voice floated down the hallway, warm and welcoming. "You are here. Come in, baby. Come in." I stepped over the threshold. "I am here, Mother," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "And I brought everything we need." I walked into the lion's den, not as the prey, but as the hunter. And I closed the door behind me. The dining room table groaned under the weight of the feast my family had prepared using my stolen life savings. It was a grotesque display of gluttony. There were lobsters stacked high on silver platters, their shells gleaming red under the chandelier light. There was a tower of seafood, majestic and expensive, dripping with ice and lemon. And there was the mac and cheese my mother had promised, baked with truffles and imported Gruyere, the smell filling the room with a rich, suffocating heaviness. I sat in my usual spot, the seat to the left of my father. But tonight, I felt like a stranger watching a play. I watched Brad pour the wine. It was a Chateau Margaux 1995, a bottle that cost more than my first car. He poured it with a heavy hand, splashing a few drops of the crimson liquid onto the white tablecloth. He did not care. Why should he care? He did not pay for it. To family, Brad toasted, raising his glass high. To resilience. And to Tiana, for finally seeing the big picture. My father raised his glass. To family, he echoed, his eyes wet with emotion that I knew was entirely performative. He looked at me with a benevolence that made my skin crawl. "I am proud of you, baby girl. You are doing the right thing. You are securing our legacy." I raised my glass, but I did not drink. I looked at the dark red liquid, and all I could see was the blood they had sucked from my future. Ebony sat across from me, picking at a lobster tail with her manicured fingers. She was wearing a new dress, something shimmering and tight, that looked like it belonged in a nightclub, not a family dinner. She caught my eye and smirked. "You know, Tiana," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "I am glad you finally came around. I was telling Mom earlier that it was only a matter of time. You were just throwing a temper tantrum, like you always do." I cut a piece of my steak. "Is that what it was?" I asked, my voice mild. "Of course it was," Ebony said, waving her fork. "You were jealous. You saw Brad making moves, you saw us leveling up, and you got scared. But honestly, sis, it is better this way. What does a woman like you need with all that money anyway?" "A woman like me," I repeated. "You know," Ebony shrugged. "Unmarried, no kids, no prospects. You just sit in that apartment hoarding wealth like a dragon. It is sad, really. At least now the money is doing something useful. It is building an empire. It is supporting a real family." The table went quiet for a second. My mother looked down at her plate, but she did not scold Ebony. She did not defend me. She just took a sip of her wine, silently agreeing. I looked at my sister. I looked at the greed etched into her beautiful face. She truly believed she deserved my money simply because she had a husband and a child. She believed my existence was secondary to hers. "You are right, Ebony," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. I realized I was being selfish. That is why I am here, to fix it. Brad clapped his hands together. That is the spirit. Now let us eat. This lobster is fantastic. We ate. I watched them gorge themselves. I watched my father laugh at Brad's terrible jokes. I watched my mother fawn over Ebony. They were drunk on their own victory. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won the lottery, and I was just the cashier handing over the giant check. When the plates were cleared and the dessert was served, a decadent chocolate soufflé that collapsed in the middle, I knew it was time. I reached under my chair and pulled out the blue folder. The room went silent instantly. The laughter died. All eyes were on the folder. The hunger in their eyes shifted from the food to the paper. I cleared my throat. I brought the documents, I said, just like we discussed. Brad practically leaped out of his chair. He reached across the table, his fingers twitching. Let me see, he demanded. I held the folder back. Not yet, Brad. We need to do this properly. I opened the folder and laid it flat on the table. The gift affidavit was on top. It was simple, clean, and damning. It stated that the $4 million was a gift, a voluntary transfer with no expectation of repayment. Brad scanned it quickly, his eyes darting back and forth. This looks good, he said. Standard language. Irrevocable gift. Perfect. Where do I sign? Wait, I said. I turned the page. Underneath the affidavit was the second document. The trap. The declaration of source and use of funds. It was dense. It was filled with legal jargon about banking compliance and anti-money laundering regulations. It looked boring. It looked bureaucratic. But in the middle of the page, there was a section I had pre-filled, a section that listed exactly where the money was going. Repayment of unauthorized withdrawals from Grace Chapel Pension Fund, coverage of insolvent positions in Kingdom Growth Capital, consulting fees to Marcus Vance. I need you all to sign this one too, I said, my voice steady. Brad frowned. What is this? Why do we need this? The gift letter is enough. No, it is not, I lied smoothly. Because the amount is over $10,000, and because there was a fraud alert on the account, the bank needs to trace the destination of the funds. They need to know it is going into a legitimate business enterprise. This just proves that the money is being used for your company, Brad. It protects me from the IRS. It proves I am not laundering money for cartels or terrorists. My father leaned in, squinting at the paper. He did not read the line items. He just saw the government seal I had pasted at the top. It makes sense, he said, puffing out his chest. Compliance is important. We do not want the IRS looking too closely at my accounts either. If this satisfies the bank, we should sign it. But it lists the church fund, Brad muttered, reading the fine print. That shows it is a charitable initiative, I said quickly. It shows you are reinvesting in the community. It makes you look good, Brad. It makes the business look solvent and philanthropic. Brad looked at me. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at the $4 million that was so close he could almost taste it. Greed is a powerful blinder. It makes smart men stupid, and it makes stupid men reckless. Brad was reckless. Fine, he said, grabbing my fountain pen. Let us get this over with. He signed his name with a flourish. Brad Davidson. He pushed the paper to my father. Sign it, Marcus. Let us get the champagne back out. My father took the pen. He signed Marcus Vance directly under the line that admitted he took consulting fees for soliciting funds. My mother signed next. Then Ebony. They passed the folder around the table like a collection plate. They were signing their own confessions. They were admitting in writing that they knew the business was a fraud, that they knew the money was stolen from the church, and that they were using my funds to cover it up. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I watched the ink dry on the page. It was black and permanent. Okay, I said, pulling the folder back toward me. I checked the signatures. They were all there, clear, legible, damning. I closed the folder and snapped the elastic band shut. Is that it? Brad asked, his eyes bright. The hold is released. I put the folder into my bag. I zipped it up. Yes, I said. The bank will have everything they need by tomorrow morning. Brad let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed Ebony and kissed her. My mother clapped her hands. My father leaned back in his chair and lit a cigar. You did the right thing, Tiana, my father said, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. You finally stepped up. I am proud of you. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The nausea was gone. I looked at them, really looked at them. The wine stains on the tablecloth, the lobster shells piled on the plates, the smug satisfaction on their faces. They were celebrating a crime, and they had just invited the police to the party. Thank you for dinner, I said. My mother looked up surprised. You are leaving already. Stay for coffee. We are going to open presents. Presents, I asked. Brad bought everyone a little something to celebrate the funding, my mother beamed. I looked at the pile of gift bags in the corner. More things bought with stolen money. No, I said. I have to go. I have a lot of work to do tonight. Suit yourself, Ebony said, rolling her eyes. More for us. I walked to the door. The sound of their laughter followed me. It sounded thin now, brittle. I stopped at the threshold and turned back. The meal was delicious, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. Truly. The lobster, the wine. It was exquisite. They looked at me, smiling, expecting another compliment, expecting submission. It is a shame, I added, my voice dropping an octave, that this is the last meal you will ever eat in this house. The room went quiet. The smiles faltered. What did you say? Brad asked, his brow furrowing. I did not repeat myself. I did not explain. I just smiled a small, cold smile. Enjoy the coffee, I said. I turned and walked out the front door. I walked down the steps into the humid Atlanta night. The air felt clean. I walked to my car. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew what was coming. I got into my car and started the engine. I pulled out of the driveway. I drove 50 feet down the road and pulled over. I picked up my phone. I dialed Agent Miller. I have the signatures, I said. They signed the confession. The party is still going. I heard Miller give a command in the background. Go, he said. I watched in the rearview mirror. 3 houses down, the utility truck that had been parked on the street suddenly burst into life. The back doors flew open. A dozen agents in tactical gear poured out. They moved silently, swiftly, like shadows. Blue lights exploded in the darkness, silently flashing against the trees. The raid had begun. I put my car in drive and slowly rolled down the street. As I passed the front gates of my childhood home, I saw the first agent hit the door with a battering ram. I did not hear the wood splinter. I did not hear the screams. I just drove. I had work to do. I had a life to reclaim. And for the first time in 34 years, the balance sheet was finally 0. I did not drive away. I could not. I pulled my car to the curb just past the neighbor's hedges and killed the engine. I rolled down the window, letting the humid Atlanta night air fill the cabin. The street was quiet. The crickets were singing. Inside the mansion behind me, my family was likely pouring coffee and laughing about how easily they had manipulated me. They were probably discussing how to spend my $4 million. Then the world exploded. It did not start with a siren. It started with light. From both ends of the street, unmarked SUVs and tactical vans swarmed in. They moved with terrifying speed and coordination. In seconds, the quiet darkness of Buckhead was shattered by a blinding kaleidoscope of red and blue strobe lights. It looked like an invasion. It looked like war. The neighbors' lights flickered on. Curtains twitched. The wealthy elite of Atlanta were waking up to see that the rot wasn't coming from the outside. It was right next door. I watched from my rearview mirror as a dozen agents in windbreakers, emblazoned with FBI, swarmed the driveway. They did not ring the doorbell. They did not knock politely. A battering ram swung forward. The heavy oak door, the one my father had imported from Italy, the one he claimed cost $20,000, splintered like matchwood. The sound was a dull boom that vibrated in my chest. Police, federal agents, search warrant. The shouts were rhythmic, aggressive, and overlapping. It was a chaotic symphony of law enforcement. I got out of my car. I had to see it. I had to witness the dismantling of the lie. I walked back toward the gate, my heels silent on the pavement. I stood in the shadows just outside the perimeter the police had established. Inside the house was chaos. Through the large bay windows I could see figures running. I saw the flashlight's beams cutting through the interior, illuminating the expensive art and the panic. The front door was wide open now, hanging off its hinges. Agents were dragging people out. The first one out was Brad. He was not walking. He was being carried. Two agents had him by the arms, his feet dragging on the stone steps. He was screaming something unintelligible. His shirt was torn. His face was red. I watched as he tried to twist away. The golden boy, the genius investor, was fighting like a trapped rat. "I am a businessman," he shrieked. "You cannot do this. I know people. I want my lawyer." "Shut up," an agent barked, spinning him around and slamming him against the hood of a tactical vehicle. Then I saw something that made me smile, a cold, humorless smile. Brad tried to run. He actually tried to run. As the agent reached for his cuffs, Brad kicked backward and scrambled toward the side gate, toward the manicured gardens, and the darkness of the golf course beyond. He made it 3 steps. A third agent tackled him. They went down hard into my mother's prize-winning hydrangeas. Brad face planted into the dirt. The agent pressed a knee into his back. I heard the distinct click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. The man who threatened to destroy my career was now eating mud in a $3,000 suit. Next came my father, Marcus Vance, the deacon, the pillar of the community. He was not running. He was stumbling. He was still holding his glass of cognac. It was a surreal image. He walked out onto the porch surrounded by SWAT team members looking dazed. He was trying to maintain his dignity, trying to stand tall, but he was shaking. "Put the glass down," an agent ordered, pointing a rifle at the ground. My father looked at the glass like he had forgotten he was holding it. He dropped it. It shattered on the stone steps, the expensive amber liquid splashing onto his polished loafers. "Do you know who I am?" he bellowed, finding his voice. "I am Marcus Vance. I am a personal friend of the mayor. This is a mistake, a harassment." "Turn around," the agent said, grabbing his shoulder. My father stiffened. "Do not touch me." The agent did not argue. He spun my father around and forced his hands behind his back. My father grunted in pain as the metal cuffs bit into his wrists. The man who ruled his household with an iron fist, who threw glasses at his daughter, was now utterly powerless. Then came the women. My mother Viola was being escorted by a female agent. She was not walking, she was limp. Her legs gave out halfway down the stairs and she collapsed into a heap of silken pearls. My heart," she wailed, clutching her chest. "I am having a heart attack. You are killing me." It was a performance. I knew her performances. I had watched them my whole life. This was the fainting spell she used when the credit card bill came or when she did not get her way at the country club. The agents were not impressed. The female agent checked her pulse and said something into her radio. "She is fine, get her up." They hauled her to her feet. She went limp again, screaming that she needed an ambulance, that she was a delicate woman. They dragged her toward a waiting van, her heels scraping the pavement, leaving black scuff marks on the driveway she was so proud of. And then there was Ebony. My sister came out fighting. Not with her fists, but with her phone. She was holding her iPhone up, streaming live. She was shouting into the camera, her face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. "Look at this," she screamed. "Look at what they are doing to us. We are successful Black entrepreneurs and they are tearing our house apart. This is racism. This is police brutality. Share this. Everyone share this." She was trying to spin the narrative in real time. She was trying to become a martyr. An agent stepped in front of her. "Put the phone down, Mom. I have rights." Ebony yelled, shoving the phone in the agent's face. "You cannot touch me. I am recording this for my safety. My husband is a genius. My father is a saint. You are going to pay for this." The agent snatched the phone from her hand. The live stream cut off. Ebony screamed like a child who had lost a toy. "Hey, that is my property. That is a $2,000 phone." "It is evidence now," the agent said calmly. "Turn around." "No," Ebony shrieked. She tried to slap him. It was a mistake. The agent grabbed her wrist, spun her, and pinned her against the column of the porch. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice," he said loudly. Ebony started crying then. The real ugly crying. Not the cute tears she used to get money from Dad. These were tears of terror. I stood in the shadows watching my family being lined up. They were a pathetic sight. The arrogance was gone. The luxury was gone. All that was left was the crime. Special Agent Miller walked out of the house. He was holding the blue folder. My blue folder. He walked over to where my father was standing by the van. My father was breathing hard, sweating through his dress shirt. "Marcus Vance Miller," said his voice carrying in the night air. My father looked up. "I demand to see the warrant. I demand to know who authorized this." Miller held up the folder. "You authorized it, Marcus. You and your son-in-law." My father stared at the folder. He recognized it. That is just bank paperwork." Miller shook his head. "No, Marcus. This is a confession." He opened the folder and pulled out the warrant. He began to read. The words were heavy and final. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, embezzlement of charitable funds." Miller paused. He looked directly at my father. "And aggravated identity theft regarding the accounts of Tiana Vance." My father froze. His head snapped up. "Identity theft," he whispered. "That is right," Miller said. "We know about the power of attorney Marcus. We know you used it without authorization. And we know you just signed a document admitting you used those stolen funds to cover up a felony." My father looked around wildly. He looked at the agents. He looked at the neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. He looked at the ruins of his front door. "Who told you?" he rasped. "Who gave you that folder?" Miller did not answer. He just turned and looked toward the gate, toward the shadows where I was standing. He nodded at me. It was a small gesture, but it was enough. I stepped out of the darkness. I walked into the pool of light cast by the street lamps. I was still wearing the soft pink dress, the obedient daughter costume, but my face was not soft. My father saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. For a second there was confusion. He saw his daughter standing next to the federal agent standing free while he was in chains. Then the realization hit him like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face, leaving him gray and ash-like. He looked at the blue folder in Miller's hand. Then he looked back at me. "Tiana," he choked out. The look in his eyes shifted. It went from confusion to shock to a desperate pleading. "Tiana, tell them," he begged. "Tell them it was a gift. Tell them we fixed it. You promised. We had a dinner. We made peace." I walked closer. I stopped just outside the police tape. I was 10 feet away from him, close enough to smell the fear, close enough to see the veins pulsing in his forehead. I did not say anything. I just looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown a glass at my head. The man who had called me selfish for wanting to keep the money I earned. The man who had chosen a thief over his own blood. The pleading in his eyes died. It was replaced by something else. Something dark and ancient. Hate. Pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," he hissed. "You did this. You set us up." I tilted my head slightly. "I did not set you up, Marcus." I said, my voice calm and carrying over the sound of the idling engines. "I just audited you. You are my daughter," he screamed, straining against the cuffs, spit flying from his lips. "I gave you life." "And you tried to steal it," I replied. Brad was watching now from the ground where he was being hauled up. His face was covered in dirt and blood from a split lip. He looked at me with venom. "You bitch," he spat. "You ruin everything." I looked at him. I smiled. "I saved you, Brad," I said. "I saved you from the loan sharks. Remember, you are safe now. Federal custody is very secure." Viola's wailing stopped. She looked at me from the back of the van where she was being held. Her eyes were black holes of rage. "I have no daughter," she screamed. "You are dead to me." I nodded slowly. "I know," I said. "I have been dead to you for a long time. I just decided to stop haunting you." Agent Miller stepped between us. "Get them out of here," he ordered the team. The agents began to load them into the vehicles. My father fought them. He was shouting, cursing, calling down the wrath of God on my head. I stood there and watched. I watched as my mother was shoved into a van. I watched as Ebony was placed in a patrol car, still crying about her phone. I watched as Brad was thrown into the back of an SUV. And I watched my father taking one last look at his kingdom before the door slammed shut on his reign. The engines revved. The sirens chirped. The convoy began to move. I watched the red taillights fade down the street. I watched until they turned the corner and disappeared. The street was quiet again. The neighbors were staring at me. The front door of my childhood home was gaping open, a black mouth in the white facade. Agent Miller walked over to me. "Are you okay, Ms. Vance?" he asked. I looked at the empty driveway. I looked at the house that had been my prison, my bank, and my betrayal. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like rain and ozone. "I am fine, Agent Miller," I said. He handed me a card. "We will need a formal statement tomorrow, but for now go home. Get some sleep. It is over." I took the card. "Is it?" I asked. "For them, yes," he said. "They are not getting bail, not with the flight risk and the amount of money missing. They are gone, Tiana. Gone." The words settled in my chest. They were gone. The voices that told me I was not enough were gone. The hands that reached into my pockets were gone. I walked back to my car. My legs felt heavy, but my spirit felt light. I got in and started the engine. I did not go home. I drove to the highest point in the city, a lookout over Atlanta. I stood there and watched the sunrise. I had lost my family. I had lost my history. But as the sun came up painting the sky in gold and purple, I realized what I had found. I had found myself. And for the first time in my life, I belonged entirely to me. The story broke at 6 in the morning, and by noon it was the only thing anyone in Atlanta was talking about. I sat in my office with the blinds drawn, watching the news coverage on mute. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen was in bold red letters: "Buckhead elite family defrauds historic church pension fund." They showed the footage of my father being led away in handcuffs over and over again. They showed the FBI agents carrying out boxes of evidence. They showed the weeping elderly members of Grace Chapel realizing their retirement savings had vanished into thin air. My phone had not stopped ringing for 6 hours. Every news outlet in the country wanted an interview with the whistleblower daughter. Every distant cousin who had ignored me for years was suddenly reaching out claiming they always knew something was wrong. I ignored them all. I had one meeting that mattered today, and it was not with a reporter. I walked into the regional headquarters of my bank at 2 in the afternoon. I did not need an appointment. The regional vice president was waiting for me in the lobby, looking like a man facing a firing squad. He ushered me into a private conference room where the corporate legal team was already assembled. Ms. Vance, the vice president, began, his voice trembling slightly. "First, let me express our deepest apologies. The transaction initiated by your father should never have been authorized. The power of attorney document he presented was 14 years old and specific to a medical event. Our branch manager failed to verify its current validity or the scope of its authority. It was a gross negligence of protocol." I sat there silently letting him sweat. I knew exactly what they were afraid of. They were afraid I would sue them for facilitating the theft of $4 million. They were afraid I would go to the press and tell the world that their security measures were a joke. We have reversed the transaction effective immediately, the lawyer cut in, sliding a cashier check across the polished mahogany table. The funds have been restored to your account in full. Additionally, the bank has added interest calculated at the highest market rate plus a settlement for the inconvenience and distress caused. We hope this demonstrates our commitment to making this right. I picked up the check. $4 million plus a very generous six-figure settlement. It was my life back. It was my freedom. Thank you, I said quietly. I will be closing my accounts today and moving my funds to a different institution. They did not argue. They just nodded, relieved to be getting off so lightly. They knew I could have destroyed them, but I had bigger targets. I walked out of the bank with my financial future secure. But the destruction of the Vance empire was just beginning. I drove past the estate on my way home. I could not help myself. I needed to see it. The gates were open. Federal marshals were everywhere. They were putting large orange stickers on everything. Asset seizure. I saw a tow truck backing into the driveway. They were hooking up Brad's McLaren. Next to it, my father's Bentley was already on a flatbed. They were taking the cars. They were taking the artwork. They were taking the furniture. Everything bought with the proceeds of the Ponzi scheme was now property of the United States government. The house itself had a large notice pasted to the front door. It was no longer the Vance family home. It was a crime scene and a seized asset. The neighbors were standing on their lawns, watching with a mixture of horror and glee. The Vance family, who had looked down on everyone who had flaunted their wealth, who had acted like royalty, were being stripped naked in the public square. My mother and Ebony had been released on bail an hour ago. They were not considered flight risks, and they were not the masterminds, so the judge had let them go pending trial. But they had walked out of the detention center into a world that no longer had a place for them. Their credit cards were frozen. Their bank accounts were seized. The locks on the house had been changed by the marshals. They had the clothes on their backs, and nothing else. I wondered briefly where they would go. I wondered who would take them in. The church community had turned their backs on them completely. The deacon's wife had gone on television calling my mother a Jezebel and a thief. The country club had revoked their membership via email this morning. Their fair weather friends, the social climbers, and the sycophants had vanished like smoke. I went back to my penthouse. I needed silence. I needed to wash the day off me. I poured a glass of wine and stood on my balcony looking out at the city. It was over. I had won. I had my money. I had my dignity. And they were facing justice. But peace is a fragile thing. It was 9 o'clock at night when the buzzing started. Not my phone. My intercom. I looked at the video monitor next to the door. My stomach dropped. It was them. Viola and Ebony were standing in the lobby of my building. They looked like refugees from a war zone. My mother was still wearing the cream suit from yesterday, but it was wrinkled and stained. Her hair was a mess. Her face was swollen from crying. Ebony looked even worse. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks, and she was shivering, hugging her arms around herself. I watched them on the grainy black and white screen. They were arguing with the night concierge. I could see my mother pointing at the ceiling, shouting something. The concierge looked uncomfortable. He picked up the phone. My apartment phone rang. Miss Vance, the concierge said, his voice apologetic. I am so sorry to disturb you. There are 2 women down here. They say they are your mother and sister. They say it is an emergency. They are demanding to see you. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything they had done, after the theft, after the slap, after the lies, they still thought they had a right to my space. They still thought they could demand access to me. Tell them I am not home, I said. I tried. Ms. Vance, the concierge whispered. They said they saw your lights. They are refusing to leave. Your mother is making a scene. She is saying she is going to sleep in the lobby if you do not let her up. I closed my eyes. They were going to do this the hard way. Send them up, I said. I hung up the phone and walked to the door. I did not unlock it. I waited. A few minutes later, I heard the elevator ding. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy footsteps. Then the pounding started. Tiana, open this door right now. It was my mother. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from screaming, but the entitlement was still there. The demand was still there. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. I left the security chain on, leaving only a 3-inch gap. I looked out at them. They looked pathetic. They looked broken. But more than that, they looked angry. Let us in, Ebony cried, pushing her face toward the crack. Tiana, you have to let us in. They took the house. They took the cars. We have nowhere to go. My mother pushed Ebony aside. Tiana, look at me. Look at your mother. We have been on the street for hours. Nobody will take our calls. The hotels won't take us because the cards are declined. We need a place to sleep. We need food. I looked at them. I really looked at them. I saw the woman who told me my hard work meant nothing because I did not have a husband. I saw the sister who mocked me for saving money while she spent stolen funds on handbags. You have nowhere to go, I asked, my voice calm. No, my mother sobbed. We have nothing. They took everything. You have to help us. You are family. You are the only one who has money. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I am the only one who has money, I repeated. Yes. The money you tried to steal. The money you said I did not need. That is in the past, Ebony pleaded. We are sorry, okay? We are sorry. Just let us in. It is cold. I am hungry. You are hungry, I asked. I remember being hungry. I remember eating peanut butter for dinner because you drained my account. I remember walking to work because I could not afford gas. Tiana, stop it! My mother snapped, her old authority flashing for a second. This is not a game. We are your flesh and blood. You cannot leave us on the street. It is inhumane. Inhumane, I said, tasting the word. Inhumane is stealing from the elderly. Inhumane is setting up your own daughter to take the fall for a felony. Inhumane is slapping me in a shopping mall because I cut off your credit card. I am sorry about that, Viola wailed. I was stressed. I was not myself. Please, Tiana, just for tonight. Just let us sleep on the floor. We will figure something out tomorrow. I looked at her desperate face, and for a fleeting second I felt a twinge of pity. It is a powerful instinct, the drive to help your mother. But then I remembered the folder. I remembered the signature on the confession. I remembered the look in her eyes when she told me I had no legacy. If I let them in, they would never leave. They would drain me dry again. They would eat my food, drink my wine, and tell me it was their right. They were parasites, and parasites do not change. I cannot help you, I said. What do you mean you cannot help us? Ebony shrieked. You have a guest room. You have money. You just got $4 million back. We know you did. Yes, I did, I said. And I am going to keep it. I started to close the door. My mother jammed her foot in the gap. Her expensive shoe was scuffed and dirty. Do not, you dare, she hissed. If you close this door, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are dead. I looked at her foot. Then I looked at her eyes. I have been dead to you since the money ran out, Mother, I said. I kicked her foot away, hard. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. From the hallway, the screaming started. They were pounding on the door, kicking it, wailing like banshees. Open up, you ungrateful bitch! Open up! I walked over to the intercom on the wall. I pressed the button for the lobby. Security. I said, my voice steady. Yes, Ms. Vance. There are 2 strangers in the hallway outside my apartment, I said. They are harassing me. They are trying to break down my door. I paused, listening to the screams on the other side of the wood. They claim to know me, but I do not know who they are. Please remove them from the building immediately, and if they return, call the police. Understood, Ms. Vance? Sending the team up now. I leaned my forehead against the cool plastic of the intercom. I listened. I heard the elevator ding again. I heard heavy boots running down the hall. "Ma'am, step away from the door. You need to come with us. Do not touch me. That is my daughter. She is in there. Mom, if you do not come quietly, we will arrest you for trespassing and disturbing the peace. You are already out on bail. Do you want to go back to a holding cell tonight?" The screaming stopped. There was a shuffling of feet, a sob from Ebony. "Fine," my mother spat. "Fine. We are leaving. But she will rot in hell for this. She will rot." I heard them being escorted away. I heard the elevator doors open and close. Then there was silence. I stood there in my beautiful, quiet apartment. I was alone. I walked to the window and looked down. A few minutes later, I saw two figures exit the building. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking small and lost under the streetlights. Then they started walking aimlessly into the night, dragging their feet. I watched them until they turned the corner and disappeared. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I did not want it anymore. I went into my bedroom and laid down. I was exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. But as I closed my eyes, I realized something. My bank account was full, my conscience was clear, and for the first time in my life, I was safe. They were gone, and they were never coming back. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor wax and old paper. I sat in the witness box, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I wore a navy blue suit, sharp and professional armor for the battlefield. Across the room at the defense table sat the ruins of my family. Brad looked smaller without his expensive suits. In the orange jumpsuit provided by the Fulton County Jail, he looked like exactly what he was, a common thief. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. He kept whispering to his lawyer, a man with slicked back hair who looked like he knew he was fighting a losing battle. My father Marcus sat next to him. He had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. His hair was completely white now, and his posture, the posture of the proud deacon of Buckhead, was slumped. He would not look at me. He stared at his hands, which were shackled to the table. My mother and Ebony sat behind them in the first row of the gallery. They were out on bail, but they looked like ghosts. Ebony was wearing a generic department store dress, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. My mother wore no makeup, her face haggard and gray. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. Ms. Vance, the prosecutor, began walking toward the stand. "Can you tell the court what happened on the night of November 12th? I took a breath. I looked at the jury. 12 strangers who held the fate of my family in their hands. I went to my parents' home. I said, my voice clear and steady. I went there because they told me my life was in danger. They told me my brother-in-law was unstable and armed. When I arrived, I discovered it was a ruse. They wanted to force me to sign a document covering up their theft of my life savings. I walked them through the night, the lobster dinner, the expensive wine, the laughter. I described how they celebrated the theft of $4 million. I described how they mocked me for being single, for having no legacy, while they spent stolen church funds on luxury cars. Then I presented the evidence. One by one, the prosecutor displayed the exhibits on the large screen for the jury. Exhibit A. The bank records showing the unauthorized transfer initiated by my father. Exhibit B. The spreadsheet detailing the Ponzi scheme targeting Grace Chapel. Exhibit C. The emails between Brad and my father discussing the bribes and the cover-up. Exhibit D. The audio recording of the dinner where they admitted everything. The courtroom was silent as my voice rang out from the speakers, recording the moment my mother told me I was dead to her if I did not pay up. I saw the jurors' faces harden. They looked at the defendant's table with disgust. Then it was the defense lawyer's turn. Brad's lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward me with a swagger that felt forced. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness, "you are a forensic accountant, correct? An expert in financial crimes." "Yes," I replied. "And you are very good at what you do. You know how to move money. You know how to hide it. I know how to find it," I corrected. The lawyer smiled a shark-like grin. Is it not possible, Ms. Vance, that you were the one orchestrating this scheme from the beginning? Is it not possible that you used your father and your brother-in-law as pawns? That you set up the accounts, you moved the money, and when the heat got too high, you decided to frame them to save yourself? It was a ridiculous theory. A Hail Mary pass from a desperate man. But I saw a few jurors lean forward. It was the narrative Brad had been pushing since his arrest. That the brilliant accountant daughter was the mastermind. I did not get angry. I did not get flustered. I reached into my briefcase, which was sitting by my feet. I pulled out the blue folder, the original one with the ink stains from the lobster dinner. I handed it to the bailiff. Please show this to the witness, Brad's lawyer said, confused. I opened the folder. This is the document they signed that night, I told the jury, holding it up. The defense claims I was the mastermind. But right here on page 4, underneath the gift affidavit, is a declaration of source and use of funds. I turned the document so the jury could see the signatures. It lists every illegal investment Brad made. I continued. It lists the payouts to my father, and right next to each item is their initials. They did not just sign for the money. They signed a line-item confession, detailing exactly how they were laundering the stolen funds. I looked directly at Brad's lawyer. If I was the mastermind, I asked, why would I make them sign a document that proves they were the ones spending the money? Why would I make them admit on paper that they knew the funds were illicit? A mastermind hides the paper trail. I created one that leads straight to their pockets. The lawyer froze. He had not seen this part of the document. Brad had probably lied to him too, telling him it was just a gift letter. He looked back at his client. Brad was sinking low in his chair, his face pale. He knew it was over. The lawyer stammered, trying to find a follow-up question, but there was nothing. The evidence was absolute. He muttered no further questions and sat down, defeated. Then something happened that wasn't in the script. My father stood up. "Sit down, Mr. Vance," his lawyer hissed, grabbing his arm. My father shook him off. The chains rattled loudly in the quiet courtroom. He turned around. He was not looking at the judge. He was not looking at the jury. He was looking at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. The bluster was gone. The arrogance of the patriarch was gone. He was just an old man who had bet everything on a lie and lost. He looked at Brad, the white son-in-law he had worshipped, the man he thought was the future of the family, the man he had chosen over his own flesh and blood. Brad wouldn't even look at him. Brad was busy trying to whisper to his lawyer, blaming everyone but himself. Then my father looked at me. He saw the woman I had become, the woman who had built a career from nothing, the woman who had tried to save him from himself, the woman he had thrown away. "I am sorry," he rasped, his voice cracking. The courtroom gasped. The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Vance, sit down." "I am sorry, Tiana," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I thought he was the answer. I thought he was better than us. But it was you. It was always you. You were the strong one. You were the legacy. And I broke you." He fell back into his chair, sobbing into his hands. It was a pathetic sound. The sound of a man realizing he had burned down his own house to keep a stranger warm. I watched him, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, just a quiet sense of closure. He finally saw me, but it was too late. The damage was done. The law did not care about apologies. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was immediate. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had clearly been disgusted by the exploitation of the church fund, wasted no time. She looked at Brad first. "Bradley Davidson," she said, her voice ringing through the hall. "You preyed on a community that trusted you. You used your privilege and your connections to steal the life savings of retirees. You showed no remorse. You tried to frame the witness." She adjusted her glasses. I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Brad screamed. He actually screamed. He was dragged out of the courtroom, kicking and fighting, begging for a deal that no longer existed. Then she turned to my father. Marcus Vance, you betrayed your flock. You betrayed your daughter. You used your position as a man of God to facilitate theft. 10 years she ruled. My father nodded slowly, accepting his fate. He did not fight. He just looked at the floor. Then came the women. Viola Vance and Ebony Davidson, the judge said, looking at them in the gallery. You were not the architects of this scheme, but you were the beneficiaries. You spent stolen money with abandon. You attacked the victim when she tried to stop you. You are sentenced to 5 years probation and 3,000 hours of community service. My mother let out a breath of relief. She thought she had escaped, but the judge was not finished. Furthermore, she continued, you are jointly and severally liable for the restitution. You will repay every cent stolen from the Grace Chapel Fund and every cent of legal fees incurred by Ms. Vance. That total is roughly $12 million. Your wages will be garnished. Your assets remain seized. You will not see a penny of disposable income until this debt is paid. My mother gasped. That meant poverty. That meant a lifetime of working for nothing. That meant the end of the luxury she lived for. Court is adjourned, the judge said, banging the gavel. The bailiffs moved in. They took my father away. He looked back at me one last time, his eyes filled with a desperate sorrow, but I did not look back. I gathered my papers. I put the blue folder back in my briefcase. I walked down the aisle. I passed my mother and Ebony. They were huddled together, crying not for their crimes but for their lost lifestyle. They did not reach out to me. They knew better. I pushed open the heavy doors of the courthouse. The light outside was blinding. A wall of heat and noise hit me. Reporters were swarming the steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust in my face. Ms. Vance over here. Ms. Vance, how do you feel about sending your father to prison? Ms. Vance, do you have anything to say to your family? I stopped at the top of the stairs. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the Atlanta skyline rising in the distance. I thought about the little girl who just wanted her daddy to be proud of her. I thought about the woman who had learned that pride is something you build yourself. I leaned into the microphones. I only have one thing to say, I said, my voice steady and strong. The camera zoomed in. The reporters went silent. Justice does not have a color, I said, and family is not a shield for crime. If you steal, you pay. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter who you know. I put my sunglasses on. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a business to run. I walked down the steps, parting the sea of reporters. I did not look back at the courthouse. I did not look back at the prison bus loading in the back alley. I walked toward my car where Sarah was waiting for me. She was smiling. She had a job now. She was my office manager. We got in the car. Where to, boss? She asked. Forward, Sarah, I said. Just forward. And as we drove away, leaving the ruins of the Vance dynasty in the rearview mirror, I finally felt the weight lift. The debt was paid, the ledger was balanced, and I was free. 5 years is a long time in the world of finance, but it is a lifetime when you are rebuilding a soul. I stood in the corner office of the Vance Financial Protection Group on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building in Buckhead. The view was panoramic. I could see the sprawling green canopy of Atlanta stretching out to the horizon. I could see the luxury malls where my mother used to spend my inheritance. I could see the federal courthouse where my father was sentenced. From up here, the city looked peaceful. It looked like a grid of opportunities rather than a maze of traps. My assistant buzzed the intercom. Ms. Vance, the board of directors for the Women's Shelter Network, is here for the donation ceremony. Send them in, I said, smoothing the lapel of my custom Italian suit. I was not just a forensic accountant anymore. I was a guardian. After the trial, after the media storm settled, I took my settlement money and I doubled it. Then I tripled it. But I did not do it by hoarding. I did it by building a fortress for women who had been financially abused. My firm specialized in divorce asset recovery fraud detection for widows and financial literacy for women who had been taught that money was a man's language. I had become the woman my father told me I could never be: powerful, independent, and dangerously wealthy. Sarah walked in first, holding a tablet. She looked different too. The tired, scared assistant in the trench coat was gone. In her place was my chief operations officer. She wore designer glasses and carried herself with the confidence of a woman who helped take down a crime syndicate. "We have the final numbers on the scholarship fund," Sarah said, smiling. "We are fully funded for the next decade." "Excellent," I said. "Make sure the press release goes out. I want every girl in Atlanta to know that if their family tries to steal their future, we are here to buy it back." Sarah nodded. "There is one more thing, Tiana. We got a notification from the Department of Corrections. It is about Marcus." I felt a small ripple in my chest. Not pain, just an echo of an old memory. "What is it?" I asked. "He has been moved to hospice care," Sarah said softly. "Stage 4 kidney failure. He is requesting a visit. Again." I looked out the window. I thought about the man who stood in the living room and told me I was dead to him. I thought about the man who chose a con artist over his own daughter. "Tell them no," I said. "My father died 5 years ago, Sarah." "The man in that cell is a stranger." Sarah nodded, understanding. She knew the cost of my peace. She knew I had mourned him long before his heart stopped beating. That afternoon, I decided to take a drive. I told myself it was to clear my head, but deep down, I knew I needed to see the end of the movie. I needed to see the credits roll. I drove my Tesla out of the city toward the southern suburbs. The landscape changed. The manicured lawns of Buckhead gave way to strip malls and cracked pavement. I pulled into the parking lot of a burger barn off the highway. It was a greasy run-down fast food joint, the kind of place my mother would have refused to even look at 5 years ago. I parked in the back corner and waited. 10 minutes later, the side door opened. Two women walked out for a smoke break. It took me a moment to recognize them. Viola Vance was wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair, once dyed and styled to perfection, was gray and pulled back in a hairnet. Her face was lined with deep grooves of bitterness. She looked 70 years old, though she was only in her late 50s. She lit a cigarette with trembling hands, her nails short and unpolished. Ebony stood next to her, the golden child. She looked hollow. She had gained weight, her face puffy from cheap food and stress. She was arguing with Viola, waving a cigarette around. "I cracked my window just an inch. I told you to ask for more hours." Ebony was snapping, her voice shrill. "We cannot pay the electric bill, Mom. They are going to cut it off again." "I am tired," Ebony, Viola shot back, coughing. "My feet hurt. Why do not you get a second job?" "You are young. I cannot work 2 jobs," Ebony whined. "I have anxiety. You know I cannot handle the stress. If Dad had not been so stupid, we would still be in the mansion." "Do not talk about your father," Viola said, but there was no fire in it, just exhaustion. "He is dying in prison, and we are rotting here." They stood there in the grease-scented air, bickering over pennies. They were trapped in a prison of their own making. They had no friends, no community. The black elite of Atlanta had shunned them completely. They were pariahs. They lived in a subsidized apartment 2 towns over, surviving on minimum wage and bitterness. I watched them for 5 minutes. I waited for the anger to rise. I waited for the pity. But nothing came. I looked at my mother, the woman who slapped me in Hermes. I looked at my sister, who mocked me for being single. I did not hate them. I did not love them. They were just people. Strangers who had made bad choices. I rolled up the window. I did not get out. I did not wave. I did not offer to pay their electric bill. I had paid my debts to them. I had given them every chance to be decent, and they had chosen greed. Now they were living with the interest on that investment. I put the car in reverse and backed out. As I drove away, I saw Viola look up. She squinted at my car, her eyes narrowing. For a second, I thought she recognized me. I thought she might run after the car, screaming for help, screaming for money. But she just looked away, defeated. She stubbed out her cigarette and went back into the kitchen to fry burgers. The past was behind me. I drove back toward Buckhead. There was one last stop I had to make. I turned onto Blackland Road. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawns. The street looked exactly the same as it did the night of the raid. Quiet, expensive, peaceful. I slowed down as I approached 450 Blackland Road. The gate was closed. The house had been sold at auction 4 years ago. A young couple had bought it, a doctor and his wife. I stopped the car and looked at the house. The front door had been replaced. It was a bright, welcoming red. The hydrangeas where Brad had been tackled were gone, replaced by cheerful rose bushes. There was a tricycle in the driveway. I saw the front door open. A woman walked out holding a baby. A man followed her laughing. They looked happy, genuine happy. The ghosts were gone. The stain of the Vance family had been scrubbed clean. The house was just a house again. It was not a monument to my father's ego. It was not a trap for my mother's greed. It was a home. I felt a smile touch my lips. It was real. I reached into my purse and pulled out my old phone. The one I had kept in a drawer for 5 years. The one with the old SIM card, the number my family used to call. I had kept it just in case. Just in case I needed to hear their voices. Just in case I needed to remember why I left. But I did not need to remember anymore. I knew who I was. I popped the SIM card out of the phone. It was a tiny piece of plastic smaller than a fingernail. It held all the texts begging for money, all the voicemails blaming me, all the toxic history of a family that never loved me. I rolled down the window. I flicked the SIM card out into the street. It bounced once on the pavement and disappeared into a storm drain. Gone. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like magnolia and freedom. I put the car in gear. The electric engine hummed a sound of pure potential. I had a date tonight. Not with a man, but with myself. I was going to order the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. I was going to eat a meal I paid for with clean, honest money. And I was going to sleep in a bed that belonged entirely to me. I looked at the road ahead. It was wide open. My name is Tiana Vance. I am a forensic accountant. I am a survivor. And I am finally free. Tiana's journey teaches us a brutal but necessary truth. Blood does not guarantee loyalty. Sometimes the people sworn to protect you are the very ones you need protection from. Her story proves that silence isn't weakness, it is preparation. True power lies not in revenge, but in the courage to sever toxic ties and reclaim your dignity. We learn that financial literacy is a shield, and boundaries are essential for survival. You are not a resource to be exploited. You are the architect of your own destiny. Healing begins the moment you finally choose yourself. If Tiana's victory inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power.